Okay, so as I mentioned in the intro video for this module, Kant, who is sort of the primary figure within deontological ethics, has a reputation for being very difficult to read, very difficult to understand. And Onora O'Neill, who's a more contemporary philosopher and writes the paper that you've been assigned to read for this class, also notes this in the introduction. But she sets out to offer a very clear explanation of the primary claims that we find in Kant's moral theory. And she does a very good job. I think she does such a good job that there's not really a ton for me to clarify with this video. So I'm just going to review some of the main points and highlight what I think is of extra importance and offer a few supplementary points as well. So one of the things that O'Neill notes that serves to explain why Kant's moral theory is considered so difficult is that he offers several different formulations of what he calls a supreme moral principle. And this is a moral principle he refers to as the categorical imperative. And he says this is all one thing. The categorical imperative is all one thing, but there are three formulations, and these are the names of the different formulations. There's the formulation of the universal law, the formulation of the kingdom of ends, and the formulation of the end in itself. And it's this final formulation, the formula of the end in itself, that Onora O'Neill focuses on in this piece. So that's what we're going to be talking about. But if you're interested about learning about these other two formulations, or in talking about how Kant argues that they're all one thing, please reach out to me via email. I'm happy to discuss further. Okay, so the formula of the end in itself, in Kant's own words, goes like this. Act in such a way that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, never simply as a means, but always at the same time as an end. So O'Neill breaks this down for us very nicely. She starts by talking about a key part of Kant's moral philosophy, which is the idea that each of our acts, every time we act, it reflects one or more maxim. And the maxim of an act is essentially the principle of the action. It's sort of the rule, you might understand it as the rule underlying the action or as the sort of motive for the action. So if, for example, you say that you will give some percentage of your income to famine relief each year, you have adopted as a rule for yourself the principle of giving to charity. If you are decided that you are always going to tell the truth, even when it's difficult, you have decided to adopt as a maxim, to take on as a rule for yourself, that you will never lie. So O'Neill says that maxims can also be understood as more or less equivalent to intentions. And she writes, whenever we act intentionally, we have at least one maxim, and can, if we reflect, state what it is. So when we think about what our intentions are and what our motives are, we can sort of reflect and think, okay, what is my rule for action here? What sort of maxim am I acting upon? So according to Kant, when we're looking to evaluate the moral status of our actions, whether it's good or bad, what the moral issues are at stake, we need to examine our maxims. So we need to examine our intentions and our rules for acting. So as you can tell, this is already very different than what's going on in consequentialism. He says it's only by looking at our maxims rather than the outcomes of our actions that we can decide whether an act is right or wrong. So in the case of the formula of the end in itself, we just need to check that we've acted with the intention to treat someone else, to treat people as an end in themselves, and not with the intention of using them as a mere means. Okay, so what does it mean to use someone as a mere means? To use someone as a mere means, this writes O'Neill, is to involve them in a scheme of action to which they could not in principle consent. Now, this is different than using someone as a means in general. So it's wrong to use someone only as a means and as nothing else, to not also acknowledge that they are an end in themselves, someone who has their own goals. So, for example, Kant does not prohibit using people as a means because it's something that we do all the time. So say you go to a shop and you purchase something from the cashier, you are using that person there as a means to access the goods that you are purchasing. And they are using you, you might argue, as a means of sort of keeping the business afloat, as a means of keeping their job at which they are employed continuing. And so in this instance, both people are, in some sense, using each other as a means, but they can also refuse, in principle, to participate and to consent to this agreement. So that person could quit their job. You could not purchase something from that store. You've both, in some sense, chosen to assent to the action that's going on. So one sort of paradigmatic case of using another person as a means that's often discussed in Kantian philosophy is lying to them or otherwise deceiving them. For example, if you make someone a promise that you intend to break, then you have involved them in a situation in which they have no awareness and cannot, in principle, consent to the arrangement. So in this way, you are using the person as a means of getting what you want without giving them proper agency or ability to make an informed choice. So the same issue applies to cases of coercion. For example, you've probably heard the phrase from mob movies of making someone an offer they can't refuse. So if the details of a situation make it such that a person cannot actually say no or yes in a meaningful way because they can't meaningfully reject the situation that you're trying to get them to do or the act that you're trying to get them to do because of the stakes, then you might say that they are being used by another as a mere means. So to treat another person as a mere means and not as an end in themselves is to violate their autonomy. And Kant might add their capacity for rationality, because this is very important to him. So to act with this intention and on this maxim is to wrong the person that we are treating in this way. It is to commit an injustice against them. So now, what does it look like to treat a person as an end in themselves? So O'Neill notes that treating someone as an end in themselves in the fullest possible sense might at times involve more than just avoiding treating them as a mere means. So to avoid treating someone as a mere means and to respect them as a rational person with their own intentions and motivations, to acknowledge that they have those capacities, is in some sense the bare minimum. That is what is required. Going beyond that, you might actually seek to treat someone as an end in themselves by fostering their plans, their goals, their maxims, by helping them seek out their own happiness, and in some cases, by adopting their ends as your own. So you say, oh, I hear you're working on this project. I also want that to succeed because I care about you. So I'm going to adopt that end as my own end and work towards it alongside you. So in other words, we might try to act in ways that are beneficent, meaning other-serving and other-directed, not just for our own benefit. And now Kant notes this, and this is an important part of some deontological theories. It's kind of like what we talked about in the intro video, that because we have our own goals and our own limits, because we don't have unlimited time or unlimited resources, we have to be selective about how we apply our beneficent actions. So you might undertake the goals of someone you are more intimately acquainted with, like a family member or a romantic partner, and not the goals of other people who you don't know as well. And according to Kantian ethics, this is perfectly fine. So now let's talk about some of the limits of Kantian ethics. And these have to do with intentions and results, and how these things come apart. So O'Neill points out that some of the limitations of Kantian ethics as compared to consequentialism is that our ability to assess different actions. So for consequentialism, any kind of act can be assessed morally based on evaluating its outcomes. And for the Kantian, the scope is more restricted and only limited to intentional acts. So sometimes when people talk about things like structural injustices, where the injustice accrues as the result of a number of compounding institutional features, many of which might be unintentional, but still lead to really bad effects, still harbor morally bad or otherwise unjust results, in these cases, Kantian ethics is not well equipped to address these concerns. So another sort of limitation or critique of Kantian ethics is its neglect of results. So we all know that good intentions can lead to bad results. And the Kantian can't really address this or say why in some cases someone might have good intentions or pretty good intentions and do something that actually really harms someone else. And the Kantian can't really offer a story of why that might be bad or offer a sort of moral evaluation. So when there's discrepancies between our intentions and our results, taking a deontological approach can sometimes really track with our moral intuition. Sometimes it really seems to hit the nail on the head, and sometimes it seems to be misleading. So O'Neill ends her brief summary by comparing utilitarian views on the value of human life and Kantian views on the value of human life. So for utilitarians, humans are valuable as sorts of containers for hedonic value. So insofar as they can feel pleasure or pain, they are relevant and worthy of moral concern. It's not for their own autonomy. It's not because they have their own goals and purposes. Keeping more humans alive is only good insofar as it adds to the production of more pleasure and reduces pain overall. So in some ways, this can be considered a rather cold view, a rather cold view of humanity because it involves a sort of indifference to any particularity, any difference in people, any reason why they might be special or unique, etc. It's a sort of flattening, it seems like, of what is valuable or important about human life, according to many people's intuitions. People want to say, we care about more, I think, than our pleasure, or we are important for other reasons besides just our ability to experience pleasure and pain. So the Kantian argues that human life is valuable because humans are the bearers of rational life or rational agency. Humans are unique and valuable because they have particular goals, plans, interests, capacities. And because humans have their own ends and their own rational autonomy, it is always wrong to use another person merely as a means, because this violates what is important about humans. And of course, there's plenty of problems with this as well. But that is Onora O'Neill's very clear, very simplified account of Kant's ethics. She doesn't get into the other two formulations that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. So if you're interested in talking a little bit more about the universal law formulation or the kingdom of ends formulation, I'm happy to discuss those with you further. But I think this is enough for writing your discussion posts, writing your papers, and getting a strong sense of what is at core really important about Kantian ethics. But I'm going to add a few of my own thoughts and a sort of asterisk here at the end, which I think is important to note. I just want to say, like, when I first started studying philosophy, the thing that I found very appealing about Kant's ethics was that he includes this idea that all of us, just by being human, have a sort of inviolable dignity that can't be diminished. There's nothing we can do to diminish our own dignity, to make it such that we are no longer an end in ourselves. There's nothing we can do to someone else that makes it such that they are not an end in themselves. So all of us, we are all ends in ourselves. And to me, this is a very powerful and compelling moral stance, because it means that no matter sort of who you are, the kind of life that you have led, you deserve to be treated with a certain kind of respect and a certain kind of dignity. However, this is really difficult to square with some of Kant's other views that, might be considered non-philosophical, but views that he wrote about. For example, he was a horrible racist and a horrible misogynist. And though some people say that this was just in the context of his time, he was writing in the 1700s, I think that even for his time, he had particularly awful views in these areas. And these sorts of discussions, trying to square someone's personal bigotry with their philosophy, particularly in the case of an ethical or a moral philosopher, these sorts of discussions have only recently come up in academia, but I think they're definitely worth exploring. And there's a more contemporary philosopher named Charles Mills who writes a really wonderful book called The Racial Contract. And in this book, he draws very important and philosophical connections between the racism of people like Kant and others writing in the modern period or the late modern period and others. And the sorts of philosophical theories that they espoused. So that's a big recommendation for any further reading if you're interested in exploring that further. As always, I'm happy to discuss some of those issues with you further because I think they're really interesting. I think that these contemporary discussions are important to have. But that is the sort of complicated and difficult figure of Kant. I think that should be plenty for you guys to get started on your writing, but as always, reach out if you have any questions.